I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone to our meeting. It's approximately 6:38. Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Cordova?
Here.
Councilmember Peralta?
Here.
Councilmember Silva?
Here.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Here.
Councilmember Beta?
Here.
We do have a quorum. If we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to go to the next item. That is the approval of the agenda. I noticed that we do have an executive session towards the beginning of the meeting. I'm not sure if the council typically likes to move it to the end. Do you want to leave it as is, or do you want to move it to the end?
Does it have anything to do with the agenda?
I don't believe it has anything to do specifically with any of the items there.
Let's move it to the end.
It does not, Mr. Mayor, and I would suggest that the executive session probably only needs about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, they never last that long, but
Okay.
I'd move it to the end.
And move it to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's go ahead, and if it's okay with the council, if there's no other changes, I would entertain a motion to approve as amended. Executive session move to the end.
Second. So move.
So move. And a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next, we'll go to awards and recognitions. And we have some plaques here for some very committed and loyal people that have served the town of Taos. First, see how many we have here. We just have two people.
Yeah.
If I can have the following individuals come up here, please. Mr. Richard Dick Nichols and Mr. Moises Martinez. We can have you come up here, please.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Nichols is out of state.
Okay.
His grandchildren cannot be here.
Okay. And I'd like to also recognize the chairman of the Airport Advisory Commission. If you can accept the plaque on his behalf. Mr. Don Francisco Trujillo, if you can stand up here, please. I'd just like to recognize also the rest of the members. If you could stand, please, and just be acknowledged for the members. Thank you for your service to the town of Taos. We really appreciate it. Tim Cottom, Mr. Blair, and I'm at a blank. John Hilliard. John Hilliard. Thank you for your service to the town. We really appreciate it. Thank you. On behalf of the mayor and council, I sincerely want to thank Don Francisco, also the chairman of the board, and Moises also, and well, the entire board, for their leadership in making sure that we move to the next phase of the EIS. Without your pushing the government, it wouldn't have happened. I know that you guys were very, very committed. And there was many times where I even hated seeing you guys because it's like, I know they're going to ask me what's the status, and I don't have a current report. But you know what? We moved it forward, and it was because of a lot of the leadership that you demonstrated in the Airport Advisory Board. So I'd like to read these, and I'll basically Mr. Richard Nichols reads the same, but since Mr. Moises Martinez is here, I'd like to read this, and it reads as follows. The Taos Regional Airport Advisory Board, on behalf of the citizens of Taos and the Town Council governing body, we, the Taos Regional Airport Advisory Board, honor with distinction. Actually, this should be read by you, because you're the chair. You're the chair. Yeah, you're the chair, and if I can have the, I will just give some comments afterward, but this is actually coming from the Airport Advisory Board. So if we can have the rest of the Airport Advisory Board come up here so that we can acknowledge these individuals. This is all signed by you.
And
And so good evening, everyone. The plaque reads as follows: the Taos Regional Airport Advisory Board, on behalf of the citizens of Taos and the Town of Taos Governing Board, we, the Taos Regional Airport Advisory Board, honor with distinction Moises Martinez and Richard Dick Nichols, respectively. Your selfless dedication as a Taos Regional Airport Advisory Board member for the Town of Taos and the aviation community has been instrumental to ensure a safe venue for air travel in northern New Mexico. It is with utmost appreciation that we salute you today, January 22nd, 2013. Thank you.
I want to thank the board very much for your support, just being here with me this evening. Thank the mayor. Thank the city council. It's given me the opportunity to serve on the board. Thank you so much.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, fellow Taoseños, Dick Nichols served for many, many years. He's a retired Delta pilot, also owns an airplane at Taos Regional Airport, flies in and out every week. And Moises Martinez, well-established businessman here in the community. And they gave up of their time in order to help us with what the FAA calls the second longest EIS in U.S. aviation history, only being beat out by Logan Airport in Boston. Theirs lasted a few more years than ours, but both have actually been resolved at this time. And so Dick had, he always said, once the EIS gets passed, I'm going to resign to give someone else the opportunity, and so he did. And the mayor appointed Tim Cottom to the board, who joined us last year. And Moises, if you're familiar with the MOA that was signed with Taos Pueblo, which the mayor worked diligently on, part of that MOA was that the Pueblo would be able to assign a member of the Pueblo to the board. And so Moises graciously stepped down and resigned in order to make room for our new member, Mr. Clyde Romero Jr. from Taos Pueblo. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Once again, Mr. Martinez, thank you on behalf of the mayor and council. We sincerely appreciate your commitment and loyalty to the Airport Advisory Board during your tenure. Thank you. Okay, next we will go to the Citizens Forum. At this time, do I have the sign-up sheet for the Citizens Forum? Let's see who we have. We'll open it up to the Citizens Forum. Is there anyone that would like to speak under the Citizens Forum at this time? Mr. Northrop? Welcome to our meeting.
Thank you. I have 5 issues I'm going to address. I would like the town to have a full briefing before any decisions are made to move the police department from its present location. What is the reason for the move? What will the cost of the move be? What will be the cost of retrofitting the new space? Will the new space serve all the needs of the department? Will the move be for at least 10 years? Is there adequate parking for the police vehicles and the public? And these are just a few of my concerns. This governmental body is held in very low esteem by the citizens of Taos. Most people I talk with support my belief that those at the top of Taos government are here for their own selfish reasons, be it salary, benefits, prestige, and the ability to reward friends and family and punish enemies. Public service is never included. Our town still has way too many employees and way too little money. Any proposed relocation of the police department must have a full public hearing. Citizens, including myself, have little trust in your backroom deals. The Taos News street vendors continue to endanger themselves and motorists every Thursday. Almost a year ago, this body directed Bill Morris to work out a plan to alleviate the situation. I have heard nothing since. In 6 weeks, we will pass the 4-year anniversary of the red tag closure of the Hacienda Inn, a hotel that has been a dump since at least the mid-1990s. Hotel guests were often shocked by the condition of the rooms and property in general. I made one of my frequent photographic journeys of the property a few weeks ago. Despite my advanced age, I easily entered and toured the property, including the second floor. I was able to drive up to the motel as the entrance is wide open and there are no trespassing signs. This motel eyesore and public nuisance must be secured, then torn down. The draft of the new sign code is in limbo, waiting for the New Mexico Department of Transportation to give the town a copy of the right-of-way map. Only at that time can interested parties begin to evaluate this draft. I fear many businesses will be negatively impacted by the new code, and not just businesses which have temporary portable signage. Once the right-of-way map is produced, a town representative must visit each and every business along the route covered by the proposed ordinance, giving a responsible party at this business a copy of the draft. Then public meetings must be conducted to look at the expected damage to be done to businesses and free speech by this proposed code. The police department and Kit Carson Electric continue to waste many thousands of dollars on radio ads that would be much more effectively placed in print. The police department ads focus on physical descriptions of criminals. One picture in a newspaper would be much more useful than 100 radio ads. Kit Carson Electric ads focus on former customers who are now deceased being eligible to actually receive their capital credit payments. These notices would be much more useful with inserts in our monthly electric bills. These police and Kit Carson Electric ads serve no purpose other than to line the pockets of the racist DMC broadcasting. You have any questions?
Okay, next we'll go to Mr. Jason Pfeiffer. Just for the record, I just want to let you know that the police department absolutely pays nothing to promote catching criminals in our community. That's a service that we give from DMC Broadcasting. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager, thank you for your time. We're here. I'm a volunteer with the Taos Entrepreneurial Network. That program came from a grant that this city applied for 8 years ago. And the city also invested $10,000. Because you gave us that start, we're here 8 years later. Our last meeting this last Wednesday had over 100 participants. That's telling of the fact that there's demand here and there's demand for the services we offer. More importantly than the $10,000 was your partnership. I'm not sure if Don Francisco is still here, but he was with the city and he was the go-to person. Lots of phone calls back and forth, and our organization was able to be more effective because of that partnership. And we want that partnership to continue, so we've committed to come to this council on a quarterly basis and give you a report on our activities. And that's what we'd like to start here today.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. For those of you that maybe are not familiar with the Taos Entrepreneurial Network, we're a nonprofit. Our goal is to provide professional services to individuals in need of guidance in starting or growing their business. We do this through business education, community outreach, and networking. We work very closely with lots of organizations in the area: Los Alamos Connect, the SBDC, TCEDC, Taos Chamber of Commerce, State of New Mexico. Just wanted to give you a little overview of 2012, a couple numbers. We had over 70 client engagements, so that's clients in our area that we worked with, and half of those clients were clients we worked with for well over 20 hours. And this is everything for giving them access to capital, coaching, market intelligence, network opportunities, education. In our volunteer hours, this is kind of the staggering piece. This is what makes 10 really work. We logged over 1,000 hours of volunteers time in our organization last year in helping our businesses. And I want to thank you, Oscar, for presenting at our last 10 meeting where we had that record turnout. 2013, some things we're involved in. The Youth Microloan Program, we're working with the Taos Community Foundation to get $7,500 out the door to youth that are interested in starting businesses. We're also working with an Innovate and Educate Skill Ready program, which is a comprehensive skill assessment program for employers when they're hiring employees to get the right fit. And also the broadband initiative, important for economic development. So we'll be helping Kit Carson in business education, community outreach, that sort of thing. So just wanted to, again, thank you, and here we are, and let us know what we can do to help.
Great. Thank you. I just want to thank you also for your commitment, Chris. I know you've done a lot for this organization, and I hear a lot of good things. So whatever we can do to facilitate and assist, the the Entrepreneurial Network, we're here to support it.
Great. And thank you. You already have, so
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next we have Mr. Justin Lee. Mr. Lee, welcome to our meeting.
Mayor, Council, Manager Rodriguez, good evening. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me for a second. You guys all got this sitting on your desk. I'm not here to tell you the details of this right now, but I want to thank you first for reading it. And it can be dense stuff, I know, reading economic analysis and business plans. But if you are bogged down with information, my request at minimum is that you read pages 1 and 2 of this report, and that you read Exhibits C and D, which are graphs explaining the report. And of course, all the details are backed up with the way that we created the information. We had some extensive conversations with Dick Schlarbaum and Bill Stevens, J.R. Logan, talked to Gene Sanchez about his original time on this organization with this council. And anyway, I just want to say that I'm super excited about what we're doing as an organization. It shows that if you start something and you let it build, it can actually produce revenue. And the bottom line is, if you use a 1.7 multiplier, which some argue would be too loose and others would argue would be too conservative, if you use the 1.7 multiplier, we're actually generating a GRT that's a return on your investment that's greater than what you're actually giving to our organization. So what I would like to ask for from this council is that we actually become an agenda item, and that we can make a presentation to you guys about how our trends have shown growth, and how not only the number of events have grown over the course of the last 3 years, but actually each individual event has blossomed as well. So anyway, really, I'm really excited about it. I think the bottom line, a really simple note, is that in 2013 we anticipate having 12 events, and we expect it to generate $2.3 million in direct economic impact to the community. If you talk about just creating the eco park and building that, the next step is to build the next field, to build 2 more fields, because with every other field you have, you're going to double your investment, and then you're going to triple your investment. So I know that times are tough. I know that you guys are facing horrible, probably the worst economic downturn in Taos' modern history. But to cut things that are actually bringing money into the community would be the wrong move. And I'd like to explain that more in detail. So if I could get on the next agenda for your next meeting, that would be great.
Okay. I think what the best process to do is work with the manager so that he could fully understand your presentation and what it means to the finances, and that way he could come with a recommendation based on the presentation you'll be making.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank
and
you.
then just the final note is, I know that we're on the button right now for funding, and if anything, the events that we have created, we have to create them far in the past from the actual event. So if you were to cut our funding right now, for example, we would end up killing those events because there's nobody to run them. And so you would end up, funding an organization to prepare an event that they wouldn't then create. So it wouldn't make economic sense either, just from a short-term perspective. But I want to discuss the longer stuff because I'm pretty pumped about it. So
yeah. Okay. Great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the information. Okay. Next we have Mr. Dan Yurkan. You're on. How's your last name pronounced, sir? Urian. Okay. For the record, just wanted to
Mr. Mayor,
welcome to our
Councilman, and Oscar. I'm just here to put a face to what those gentlemen were speaking about with the 10 Network a little while ago. I'm one of the co-founders and the owners of Taos Mesa Brewing across from the airport, and we spent many years in the development of our idea. And anytime we needed a resource to go to for help and assistance, especially putting together spreadsheets, the 10 Network was there for us. And it didn't just stop once we opened up. They're still there. We're still in constant communication. We got a business off the ground in probably one of the worst economic periods in Taos. And I don't really think that we would have been able to do that without the resources of TIN. So when it comes time to thinking about where is money best placed, I really, testimonial, will say that TIN has been great for us.
Right.
And I also want to cordially invite you, Mr. Mayor, to come out and play at our venue.
Great. I've heard a lot of great things about it. I've heard a lot of really good, positive things, so congratulations.
Memorial Day.
Okay, for sure. Thanks.
Put it on your calendar.
You said
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to speak under the Citizens Forum that's not on the list? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, the Citizens Forum, and we'll go to items from staff. And is the auditor not here? So if it's okay, council members, if we can move to item B, is that what we're going to move to? Item B until the auditors, and if we can interrupt wherever we're at on the agenda. The auditors were traveling, they got caught up in traffic, I understand, or something.
Yes, he should be here any moment,
Yeah.
so we can.
Okay, it's okay with the council if we do that?
I'm okay, yes.
Item B, financial update, presentation of monthly financial report for period ending December 31st, 2012.
Good
Mayor.
evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, town manager. Before you have our December report, sort of condensed, we presented one in in November for October's activity. So just to give you a little summary on the revenues, we still look like we're going to be down based on our projections. So from now on, going with gross receipts, we have stuck with that, and we've already made up for that amount. So going forward, most everything still looks to be pretty much the same based on our budget and what we are actually receiving. We will get a big payment now in January for our property taxes, which come through the county. Our expenditures currently are pretty fair, on track. There's a few skews on some of them because we're moving with the reorganization of some of the departments, moving personnel to different departments, so we will take that adjustment at mid-year, and you'll see some adjustments on the next report. Moving some of those employees to different funds also will make a difference. Looking at some of the capital projects we completed with the money wise, about 75% of two big ones, the Del Norte Lane project and also the Camino de Chamisa improvements, phase 2. We finished that in December. Final payment was out in January, so you'll see that. Still, we're very low on most of our capital projects. We have a couple in design, Camino de Merced and Old Talpo Cañon Road that is in design. So hopefully ready for construction in spring on those ones there. Debt service, I've added, we don't have any really principal and interest payments in the next 30 days. The next big ones will all come due in May and in June, so we won't have any activity until then. I did put some retirement of our loans, just down for information. Eco Park out May 2025, Town Hall 2025, some street improvements 2022, and 20 acres of land 2017. And then the rest are pretty much water and sewer bonds that are out many years. So that's just a summary. On the next page, you'll just see in detail the revenue sources, the amounts to date. Right now, we've collected we have $4,944,000 of actual revenues. Our expenditures to date in the general fund are $4,800,000 with a cash balance of $1.4 million right now in the general fund itself. I stand for any questions on that.
Okay, any questions? Councilmember Peralta.
Mr. Mayor, going back to the revenues, are you saying that we caught up our losses?
Well, we've made the adjustments verbally with the departments. We'll actually absorb them now with mid-year budget adjustments, but we've done that already just verbally with the departments.
Okay, but our revenue shortfall for the year is what?
Yes.
It's still the same?
It's still the same, $411,000.
Okay.
And the last 3 months we have been decreased in our GRT, but we did it on a 10-year basis, so that's why, we're still holding to that. If we recoup a little bit, it's not going to be in the thousands.
Mr. Mayor, one more question. In the GRT, because I haven't seen a report for December January and December.
Right.
So have those 2 months fallen short from last year, or?
Yes, they've fallen short. But and this is one of the changes that Oscar and I have discussed, is instead of giving you that, and I can still continue doing it, but we've just combined that report, and we've decided that we've ran these figures, and by the end of the year, we will be short. So we've already accounted for that. So every month that you continue seeing that the GRT is down, 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 we didn't want you to say, well, we're even down more and we're down more. We've already projected that through the end of the year. But I can still send it to you on a monthly basis just so that you can see just the GRT by itself.
The only reason I'm asking that, Mr. Mayor, if I could, ask one last question, because just looking at your report on revenues and your actuals for 2012 and 2013 are fairly close. They don't show that much of a discrepancy as the 400,000. That's why I'm asking the question.
Right. And because the GRT is, some months are higher, some months are lower, the skew is off. I mean, to get an exact amount, it does show lower. There's two different ones. You look at the state shared and the 1%. So between those two together equal the net amount that will probably be close to being off. And like I said, we can recoup some of that amount, but we've done this more on a 10-year basis than an actual cash received basis for the current year. So that's how we projected it.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, when I'm looking at fiscal year 11-12 and fiscal year 12-13, those are not actual figures?
Those are actual figures. Those are actual figures received.
Okay, so when I'm looking at the revenues down at the bottom, and it says for 2012, I've got 5 million up to through the end of December, 5,051,000.
Right.
As compared to 4,944,000. That's only $100,000 off.
So, in the majority of them is the and I think this is where Oscar has come into on the gross receipts tax, since that is our biggest revenue source. We are anticipating that we are going to be 411,000 short. We have only 6 months in this one here. We still need to collect the next 5. But some of these revenues, so say like the property taxes, that's pretty close. Franchise taxes, if you see this year versus last year, some of those are different amounts based on whatever's actually received at that point in time. So obviously last year we were down compared to this year. So I think it's just a fluctuation of all the different revenue streams that come in at different times of the month or the year. But I understand what you're saying. I can see, I ran the calculation today on the GRT are the two biggest ones. And if you take those two, it's probably more like $200 and some thousand difference versus the 411. And that's where when we've done the estimating through the end of the year, we actually took a 6% based on a 10-year history on the GRT. So that's the difference probably above what we're estimating versus actual receiving from one year to the next.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? So Marietta, the total revenues, when you say 5,051,000 and then the 4944, that's about 113,000 there.
Right.
Where is that just so far year to date in comparison?
That's year to date through December of last year through December of this year.
Okay, so we're not pacing as far off as we are anticipating. That's where you're saying that we've recouped some of the.
Right, and I think that's where you're probably seeing it is because, I mean, I can see it there too, but the way that we projected out to be very conservative is we took a 10-year on the gross receipts tax instead of taking year by year by year and looking at just what we've received each year versus the next year versus the next year. Instead, we took a 10-year trend to figure that amount out.
I would recommend, Oscar, that we, on every agenda, as soon as you get the reports, as soon as you know what the prior month did, just get an update
Yeah,
On the,
yeah.
So that-
so do you want the GRT
so we
update
could,
anyways?
Yeah, so we can know
Okay.
exactly how we're pacing and the governing body as a whole. In the event that, there's cuts that need to be made, we can start
Well,
foreseeing some of these.
Well, that's what we're making this report for, so that way ahead of time, we can come back to you about cuts. We watch this very carefully, and that's why we're projecting it at this point. So I know as you look at from one month to the next month, the tendency is to kind of average it from the previous month, et cetera. And I suppose that you can get some analysis from there, but what we're trying to do here is to say, look, at traditionally at 3 months or 4 months into the year, we will have received X amount of the revenue we will receive that year. And it's just a very basic economic cycle that we're following here, and we're trying to pace it or follow how it's pacing based on that, not on a month-to-month basis, precisely because we want to avoid arriving in May to say, "Oops, it was all wrong." So that's why all these numbers are projected to the end of the year, not just from one end of the month to the
I
other.
think this presentation, the way you're doing it now, is great, and I know you do send us the GRT updates, but I think for the benefit of the public, that we can get that at a council meeting, so that the public will also know exactly how our GRT is faring on a month-to-month.
Okay, all right. We can
Okay.
maybe what we should do is begin to post that.
Okay, we'll
Post
just,
that
yeah, we
information.
sort of took that away just to combine it with this, but we'll bring that one piece back and give that to you.
Great. Any other questions, comments on this item? If not, then we'll go to the
Auditor.
Yeah, who just stepped in.
The auditor who just stepped in. We're just welcome, sir. How are you?
Thank you.
And if I'm not mistaken, you're Mr. Cordova, right? Yeah. No relation. Well, welcome to our meeting, sir.
Thank you.
And you came in just in time for your agenda item.
All right.
So, Mr. Mayor, council members, you have attached is the audit. Just a little history. It's required by the state statute for everybody that has financial affairs of every agency be examined by independent auditor or the state auditor's office. We have contracted with accounting and consulting group. This is their 4th year?
Right, yeah.
Their 4th year with doing the town of Taos audit on RFP basis. They came in August for 5 days and did compliance testing on the grants, anything procurement, anything dealing with compliance, and then back in October, dealing with the numbers, all the cash, the investments, and the balances, so forth. So I will just turn it over to Bobby. He'll just give you a brief. I gave you, you have the audit on PDF, but you also have a little reporting package that I handed out that I got after I send you the audit. So you have that information. He may go through that or just maybe the findings.
You're done? Okay. First, I want to start off just with a couple of thank yous. I'm not sure who's responsible for setting the dates for the governing council meetings, but last Monday, we do lots of work around the state. I was driving back, and they hit a pretty bad snowstorm, and so that wasn't the bad part. I wanted my wife to kind of feel bad for me, and so as auditors, we want evidence and proof. I got my cell phone out and was recording while driving, and she was pretty upset about me at that. So anyways, thank you for, the roads are clear. I appreciate that. Other thing I want to say is, on behalf of my staff, I really want to thank Marietta and her team, and Oscar and the team in the admin. We understand going through an audit while conducting your ordinary responsibilities and duties is difficult. So again, I want to thank them. And so what I'm going to cover, I'm going to go over some of the dates, target dates throughout the last 6 months, and then I'm going to talk about the scope of the audit. Kind of just real high level. What is an audit? And then I'm going to go over the opinions that were rendered on the financial statements of the town of Taos. And then we'll talk real briefly just about the findings, because we talked about those in detail at the exit conference. And then just have a few other items to close, so it should be short and sweet. Okay? As far as dates go, as Marietta stated, in August 14th, we had the entrance conference. The state auditor requires us to have an entrance conference, and there we lay out the expectations, talk about this, again, the scope, what our planned time is to conduct the audit, and we were here in August. We were here in Taos in August, and then in October. We typically break the audit up into two separate portions. The planning phase, this is where we gain an understanding of the internal control system, and we test compliance. And then in October, once all the trial balance is closed out, no other adjustments are expected, then we come back and we actually do the testing on the numbers themselves. Okay, and then on November 27th, we had the exit conference, and this is where we discussed the results of the audit, went over the findings, the opinions rendered. The regulatory due date for the financial statement audit is December 1st. That's set forth by state statute, and we submitted the audit November 30th, so we beat that date. Just want to point out that the scrutiny of local government financial statements has really been raised over the last couple of years by the Office of the State Auditor. So it's a big deal that we, together as a team working with the town, Marietta and Oscar, received an approval for your audit because, again, any little thing within your financial statements, they could reject them, and it's considered late as far as the Office of the State Auditor is concerned. So December 14th, we got that approval. So that was a big deal, and then there was a waiting period for them to actually allow the release of the report, and that was January 9th. Okay, so that's just a timeline. Now keep in mind for this upcoming year, we really encourage the governing council to be involved in the planning phase. We send letters, and I want to thank you. We got, I think, 100% response. We ask about, tell us about the risks. What keeps you up at night? And so there's some new council members, so be on the lookout for that. It'll come in the summertime, and that's an opportunity for you to let us know this is an issue. This is what keeps us up. Okay, so what is an audit? It's an independent and objective examination of the financial position and results of operation during a period of time and as of a certain date. And so we're talking about fiscal year 2012. So it's an examination as of June 30th. What did the town own? What did the town owe? So that's the assets and liabilities. And then the results of operations. So what were the revenues and expenditures for the year? So ultimately, at the end of the day, the objective is to render an opinion about the reliability of the financial information. So that's the meat and potatoes of a financial statement audit. So in addition, the town's audit is subject to government auditing standards. So we're required to issue a report on internal control. Now, we don't render an opinion on internal control, but what we do is we gain an understanding to plan the audit, and if there's any deficiencies in design or the operating effectiveness of the internal controls, we'll point that out. And so there's a second letter within your financial statements, and the levels of severity are defined, and then they're referred to, and they're included in the back. Not every local government in our state is subject to a single audit, but the town spent $2.1 million, a little over $2 million in federal awards. So we conducted a single audit, and in that report, we actually do render an opinion about your compliance over the major programs. So it's not over every federal program, just those major programs, and we'll talk about that opinion. So that's the overall objective. Again, the responsibility of your financial statements lies with the town, and our responsibility is to render an opinion about the reliability of those. And so there's three letters essentially to the reader of your financial statements in there, and that's from our firm, and then the town again is responsible for the financial statement. So if you're going out for debt, you want to go. You had a big loan, $1.6 million in fiscal year 12 for road projects. Whoever it's through NMFA, they're going to look at the independent auditor's report and use that to determine whether your financial statements can be relied upon. Okay, so that's just the big picture. As far as the opinions that are going to be rendered, that were rendered on your financial statements. On the financial statements themselves, it was an unqualified opinion. So the opinions that an auditor can render on financial statements, that's the best opinion you can get. We did have audit adjustments, and these are just your typical audit adjustments to convert to the various bases of accounting that's required by generally accepted accounting principles. And in your packet, it's called the SAS 114, 115 reporting packet, and the communications in there are the audit adjustments. Typically, we don't have you post these audit adjustments because, again, it's just to convert to the full accrual basis of accounting. Okay, so that's it. And then the opinion that was rendered on your A133 report, A133, that's the circular that Washington, D.C., when they trickle money down to the local governments, again, we're charged with, that your auditor is charged with auditing the specific major programs, and it's all done on a risk-based approach. So not every one of your federal programs is examined, but this year it was Community Against Violence, and that's from HUD through DFA, and then the EPA Clean Water Revolving Fund, and that's through the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and that's flowed through New Mexico Environment Department. Okay, so those were the two major programs. So what Washington does is they give us a guide on what are the things we have to test for, what are the requirements that are out there for those two programs, and we test for those requirements that are direct material to the town. The opinion that's going to be rendered on your A133 report that was rendered is an unqualified opinion. So that means you complied in all material respects with regards to the requirements set forth for those two major programs. Okay, so that's again, pat on the back, that's a big deal.
It's funny how the word unqualified gives a different tone to it.
Well, yeah, if I go and tell you guys are unqualified, you're going to be like, hey, I'm not here to do the job, right? So, well, what it's supposed to mean is, a qualified opinion would be all your financial statements can be relied upon except for something. So something you have a severe internal control deficiency, or you don't have enough evidence to support the balance as of a certain date, or for the revenue or expenditures of a period. And so unqualified is what you want to be in this case. Okay, so.
But you need to be qualified.
Yeah, you do need to be qualified. As far as the findings go in the back, I'm not going to talk in detail. We covered that in the exit conference. Just want to point out, to understand the finding number on the front. So FS 2010, that 2010, we talked about this at the exit, that's the first year that the finding came into place. So those ones that are getting older than a year or two, you really want to focus as a governing body to fix those. Okay, so do what you can to make decisions and have management implement those processes to ensure that those go away. Last year we noted a material weakness, and there were several items that we noted. This year, in our opinion, again, this is a subjective, we've downgraded it to a significant deficiency. So those terms, you can look at the report on internal control and that'll define, but what it means is it's less severe, but it still merits the attention of the governing body and management. We had a non-compliance. When the term other matter, in the state of New Mexico, there's a zero threshold reporting. So if we find anything, we're required to report it. Other states don't necessarily have that, and so you would have got a separate letter. It would have been included in that correspondence, but we're required to put it in the report because the Office of the State Auditor requires that. So we had a couple of small matters, compliance issues that we noted. When we conduct the audit, we do a risk-based approach. So there's certain things we won't look at every single year. There's certain things we will look at every year. We decided, we're going to go check out the landfill. Hadn't looked at that yet, and we noted some deficiencies there. So, again, procedural processes. We discussed it at the exit. Had a nice, candid conversation, and we had some good ideas on what to do to tighten things up there. And then, there was a small other matter budget item we noted, and so this just deals with in April, May frame time. That time frame. We got to monitor the budget in terms of increasing revenues if you increase expenses, because it's just basically a mathematical computation, but you have to have beginning cash to support any anticipated deficits. So it was 2 funds. So again, just a little closer monitoring here in the next few months. Make sure you get that taken care of. So
I just want to note that the auditor issued a recommendation, just for the listening public. The auditors issue a recommendation, and in all cases, the agency's response was to agreeing with the auditor's recommendations on how to remedy these procedural deficiencies that were noted.
Sure. Other items, GASB, that's the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. They're the standard-setting body for GAAP, which is Generally Accepted Accounting Principles for local governments throughout our country. And they've issued some statements, and you just need to be aware of this because you're charged with the overall financial reporting responsibility. And so we'll work close with Marietta and Oscar. But there's one in particular we got to pay close attention to. It's effective for 6/30/13. It's a GASB 60, and it's concerning agreements with public or private entities, and you're providing a service to the constituents of the town. And so, just be aware that that's out there, and we'll talk about that more in depth closer as the year's end. And so but it's going to affect the financial reporting of the town more than likely. The report's 135 pages. There's lots of numbers and financial information, and if you don't have an accounting background and you just kind of want the layman's, what's the short version of this? There's an executive summary in the front, and the term is called Management's Discussion and Analysis. And so in there, you can read about the operations during the year, and that's kind of the short, readable version for the non-accountants in the council up there. So again, Marietta and Oscar prepared that, and it's a big deal because it shows that you understand your financial statements. A lot of local governments receive findings for not understanding their financials or not preparing them. And the questions you ask and preparing that MD&A, we use as support, because we get asked by the state auditor, well, why don't you include that? Well, these are the reasons why. So it's important, throughout the year to keep notes on what you think for fiscal year 13 would be beneficial to the reader of your financial statements to include in that MD&A. Other than that, again, we travel around throughout the state. We love coming to Taos, in my humble opinion, and a lot of my team members would agree. Best food, no doubt, in the state, so we like that. And again, they really appreciate working with folks that care and want to get things right. So, I again want to thank you for that. Other than that, I'll take questions, but we really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions, comments? Councilor Gonzalez?
With regards to the GASB report that you were talking about and that public-private, the findings that will affect the overall financial report, can you explain that a little bit more as far as to what that entails? And I know you said we'll talk about it later, but
well, what that is it's a reporting standard regarding it. It has nothing to do with the findings or anything like that. What that has to do with is called succession concession arrangements. And if you enter into an agreement with another government, say, there are certain ways that you got to account for if there's assets transferred or to be transferred over the life, and then the way you account for the revenues and expenses that are generated from that. So just we don't have toll roads here, but for instance, if a contractor came to you and said, "Hey, I want to build a toll road. I'll put up the money for that. I'm going to collect all the fees, and then after 30 years, then the town can own it." That would be a situation, and it's going to affect the way that you report income, and it's going to affect the way you report the capital assets, and you amortize certain costs over the life of that agreement. So it has nothing to do with findings or anything like that. It just has to do with how you account for the assets, the liabilities, and then the income that's involved and the expenses related to that arrangement. So MOUs and JPAs, we got to really pay attention close to those and find out if they're applicable in this instance.
Any comments, Councilor Silva?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one question, just for clarification or for my understanding. Of course, you talked about what an unqualified opinion means. Can you explain to me what repeated and modified means?
You're looking in the very back?
Yes, I'm looking under
134?
Yeah, 131.
131, okay. Government auditing standards, they require us to follow up on prior year audit findings, and then we have to then determine whether the finding's been repeated and modified, or resolved. And so that's just indicating findings that you'll find in the 2011 audit report, and they are repeated, but we put the term modified in there because you did make strides towards getting those fixed, and so the language that we used in there was modified.
Okay.
So that's what it means. So the finding was repeated. It wasn't resolved. It wasn't completely taken care of, but you did make strides, and so that's why we put the term modified in there to adjust the language in the condition of the issue.
Councilman, but you do point out an important point here. Our goal always is to show up at the next audit with no repeated findings, and that certainly will be our goal for the next time you see this report.
And I can really appreciate that. And I have personally, since I've been councilman, I've seen some real strides in doing a better job, and we're getting to the point where, I mean, this is impeccable, Marietta, and your department and Oscar and all the staff. I think this is what we need to be doing to run government. Thank you.
I just have one question. I know that, and this is more of a legal question. Did you research? I remember when we received the audit, when they have the initial findings, if you will, then that allows the agency to give a response. And there was a little bit of a discrepancy as to, is that public record at that point, or in its final form, where you have the full disclosure of, because some of the findings may be a misunderstanding of the auditor, or that way gives the governing body or the finance department to address that issue and clarify or accept that there is a deficiency on there. Sure. Is it public record at that point, or is it not? I know that
is Mr. James here?
Yeah, Mr. James is right there.
Nice to meet you. I hadn't met you yet. I'd sent an email, and our understanding, and we corresponded after our exit conference with the Office of the State Auditor, and from the correspondence with them, that anything related to the audit, findings, anything in the report, anything that impacts the financial statement audit is not to be discussed in a public setting until the financial statement's released by the Office of the State Auditor.
But is it public record? In other words, can somebody get a copy of the document you submit to Marietta before the draft?
Yeah. Again, my understanding is no until it's released. So they can request it, but they have to wait until it's released. Yeah. And so again, I would love to get the answer, because that's just our understanding, and I will resend the email if I can, and we can get the answer. But I'm pretty sure, again, our understanding is that nothing regarding the audit, anything contents of the report, can be discussed until the Office of the State Auditor has released it.
Okay. I just want to make sure that Brian's in the loop there, because I know he had some concerns or some conflicting statutes that gave him a different
sure.
opinion.
Yeah, we had a good discussion, and so but again,
this way our clerk knows when she gets a request, she knows exactly what to follow through with.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? If not, this is an approval. What is the pleasure of the council?
I move that we accept the audit.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, and I appreciate you coming and all your hard work that you did. And I don't think you're going to have to film the road going back to prove to your wife that there's no snow.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I was doing it so she'd feel sorry for me,
okay.
and didn't work out,
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you. And
Thank
have
you.
a safe trip.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a nice night.
Next, we will go to item C. And before we go to item C, D, and E, and F, I think all of these correlate together and they relate together. So I'm going to ask Oscar to make an opening statement on these, and then we will go to each of the items. Oscar.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mayor. Mr. Mayor,
Just for the record also, I did promise the constituents, since this thing has been coming, that when it became formally on the agenda, that I would allow some public comment on it. So just to let the council know.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's with a certain amount of excitement and public service, spirit of public service, and just a little trepidation as well, that we bring you these 4 items. One of them is the review of the performance of the emergency dispatch. It's the review that you get for all the departments. I just thought it was appropriate to bring it to you now when you are going to consider information on other aspects of the emergency dispatch. You'll also hear a report from our consultant on the matter, and followed up by at least our recommended draft of the joint powers agreement that we hope gets approved by all the partners that have been involved in emergency dispatch with Taos now for almost 20 years. And the last item is a grant agreement. Again, this is the grant agreement by the state to replace the existing 911 equipment and ancillary repairs that go along with that. None of these items are here before you as an action item. It was the information that you're going to get here is weighty information.
Item E says consideration and approval. Is that?
Well, yes, sir. Yes, sir. But I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. Okay. It's not our intention at this point that you take action on any one of these items. The information here is pretty weighty, and there's a lot of things that have to, I think, be carefully weighed before you make a decision. And we would just ask you to take that time, Mr. Mayor. And so maybe what could happen later on as well, because I guess I just don't see a lot of people in the audience now, but what you could do as well, when these items come for action, you could at that point also invite the public to weigh in on them. So if I may, what I'd like to do is just real quickly introduce you to the staff that's been working on this. I appreciate the work that they've had. We've met weekly now since, I guess, late September. We meet every week. We consider every little piece of the emergency communications operations so that we can all understand it, so that we can figure out ways to make it better, to make it least expensive, and to weigh in all the possibilities. And you have those staff people here before you. I asked them to come here in the event that you had questions, and I will tell you. I'll tell them what I've told them every week, and just so you know that they were invited at all occasions to bring forward any concerns, any questions, any doubts, any extra information that they had, so that we could take those into consideration without any fear or retribution or somehow that they had to buy any kind of a party line. They just had to bring the information, and we had to be able to deliberate that. And so those people here are Ruben Martinez, our IT director. You can see in the corner there. Our police chief, Kenneth Koch. Our dispatch supervisor, and I will call Shirley Lujan. She's been at the helm there now, I guess, since it started way back in the 90s. Almost. And our fire chief, Leroy Gonzalez. Abigail, I mentioned to you months ago that I had put her in charge of this project, to lead this project, and so she's the one who's going to be making the report. What you're going to hear, I'll just go ahead and give you the punchline at the very beginning. What you're going to hear in our department performance review, that we have many needs in the way we provide 911 in the to the community. We have many needs, and we are not performing there. We are not providing the service that we would like to provide, that we know that the public expects and hopefully will explain to you why it is that we're not meeting even our own expectations, let alone the expectations I think that the average citizen has about when they have 911. The main problem you'll hear there is that among the many needs, and to be sure, space is and the conditions of the facilities are a big need, but even a greater need than that, a much greater need than that, is the institutional setting in which these operations, in which we try to operate. For all intents and purposes, the setting, the institutional setting that was set in place to start this, it has now disintegrated. And Mr. Mayor, now we, in essence, are a vendor, a provider, if you will, of services to people who, at the beginning, started out to be our partners. And so, with that institutional setting, I think we've fallen far behind what standards there are for these kinds of operations, and we're very concerned. And one of the things you're going to hear from us, if there's anything we should change, the thing that we need to change the most here is that institutional setting. In the item that you have there, the Joint Powers Agreement, that's our draft. It was a draft of a proposal that we got from the county. It was provided to us by Jake Caldwell, the county manager at the time. We have taken that very seriously, and we have made our own changes to that, and we sent it back to the county in the hopes that we will then begin to engage and come up with a new Joint Powers Agreement that everyone can find acceptable. Now, the most prominent piece of that, there's many big pieces there. The most prominent piece there is that we invite the partners to help us recruit an executive or a director for this department. By the way, this department does not have a director. We have been calling Shirley a superintendent up until now, and very unfairly to her, expected her to be both a supervisor, a dispatcher, and a director. And we have now, Shirley has decided to accept more concretely her position as a supervisor, and so as a result, that position, as far as we're concerned, Mr. Mayor, is open now, and so we look forward to working with our partners to try and fill that position. Among the other things that's in the
partners, excuse me, Oscar, I just want to welcome Commissioner Baroni, Chairman of the County Commission, who's in the audience. Welcome him and his wife, Della. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you. And we'll allow you to make some comments if you need to as well. So thank you for being here. Also, CEO Luis Reyes and his wife, thank you for being here as well. So, thank you. Sorry about that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Smith, thank you for pointing that out. And so that's one of the very big changes there. The other change there is that we leave blank there the location of the center, very much recognizing that is going to be a decision that we're going to have to share. This is going to have to be shared with our partners because the cost of moving here, there, and yon, anywhere, doing anything that brings us even to an adequate state of operations is something that's going to be something that the town cannot afford to take on by itself. And so, anyway, the Joint Powers Agreement is written with that the spirit in mind, and hopefully we'll be able to get some movement. It's a very, if you will, our main message today is that institutional change has to take place, and by a new JPA, only by a new JPA can we expect that institutional change to take place. The other item that's on here is the agreement the grant agreement by the state. And we will, and there it is. I mean, as we very much expected it, we are going to ask you to authorize at some point us to execute that grant. But we would tell you that it would not be our intention to go ahead and execute it until we finally have a joint powers agreement that we think is what's necessary for the operations that we have now. I would tell you, and it is a very hard thing that I say here, and I understand it very much, but I would tell you, and you'll hear the particulars later on in the presentation, that if we're not able to change, Mr. Mayor, if we're not able to change the institutional setting in which we operate, then I would recommend to the council that you very seriously consider resigning the 911 operation because we can't afford it, and we can't afford the liability behind that. And I think there's you'll see here a track record of us underfunding that operation. I think to the detriment or to the great liability of the town, and also to, I think, to leave the impression with the public that somehow they are well served by a 911 operation service that we have right now. The other item that's on here will be the report by Mr. Bud Lake, our outside consultant. In essence, what he'll be pointing out to you is a facility that is inadequate. And for many reasons. He'll go through each one of those reasons, and he'll also point out a basic fact here that makes this any policy direction we take here a very difficult one, and that is to move anywhere out of that operation is going to cost. It's going to be a cost that the town cannot afford. And you'll see in his presentation, it'll be in the neighborhood of some $300,000. And to stay in the current operation would require a major remodeling effort in order for us to just provide the basic working conditions. I think that are dignant for anybody being called to make such weighty analysis and weighty decisions that have sometimes the balance of life behind them. And in order for us to make that renovation, we would have to move out of that operation, move out of that facility, and by doing that, bring on then the very big cost of moving out, even for a couple of months. So either way you go, it is a big expense. It is an expense that the town cannot afford on its own, and at the same time, we are in a situation where we cannot afford. Absolutely cannot afford to continue operating and leave things as they are and leave the status quo as they are. Anyway, without any further explanation, we'll just go ahead and start with the presentation of the department review.
So this, just for the listening audience, this is the department division review as we've done every council meeting of all the other
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
departments. And since we have the report, it was best to put the communications in this same meeting. So we've been receiving monthly updates or monthly reviews of each department so that the council fully understands what their needs are, what their strengths and what their weaknesses, and how can we improve those. So happy to go. Continue.
Mr. Mayor, council members, good evening, members of the public. I'd like to first draw your attention to the picture that's in front of you. What you see there are 5 screens. That by no means is state-of-the-art equipment. Most of the dispatch centers that have better technology than what our current dispatch center has usually have 1 or 2 screens, one screen that opens up multiple windows, as well as a second screen usually used by NCIC, the National Crime Information Center, which is used to run an individual's criminal history. What I'll also point out is that there's some drinks there to the left, your right on your screen, as well as some snacks, and this is at no fault of the dispatchers. The current facility does not allow for any space that would allow for the individual or the dispatcher to eat elsewhere, so they work at their stations and eat there as well and drink. The vision statement, if you take a moment to read that, I'll point out that that's also an issue. It's currently seen as a service that's provided by the town and not that of a regional dispatch center. It's an institutional setting that Oscar talked about that we need to move away from. The employees see themselves as the individuals that need to enhance the quality of life of our city, and not necessarily a regional effort where all of our partners have a say into the decisions that need to be made for the dispatch center. Duties and responsibilities. Most individuals have watched TV and had seen a Hollywood setting in which the individual needing help calls dispatch center. On the receiving end, they have a dispatcher who is calm, collected, knowledgeable, and can help them during that critical moment. Although our dispatchers currently obtain the critical information to help us out, I must stress that it is still a basic service that we provide, and we do not have the means nor the technology to do what is portrayed on television. As well as answering 911 calls, our dispatchers are also responsible for non-emergency dispatch calls, which are alarms, public assistance requests, as well as late crimes. Late crimes are those crimes that are reported at a later date. For example, we have individuals that their second home is here in Taos, so when they come back to visit Taos, they learn that maybe their home was broken into during their absence, and so that's what's considered a late crime. And on top of that, we also have after business hours for our Public Works Department, to include our Public Utilities Division and the Taos County Sheriff's Department. Both of these offices shut down at 5, and any calls after those hours go to our dispatchers. And aside from that, they also provide non-public safety and private services dispatch. So when we're driving through the canyon and we see that there is a dead animal on the roadway, we usually, once we exit the canyon, call dispatch, and then they're responsible for contacting the proper agency to remove that dead animal, as well as any tow truck dispatch. There are 7 tow truck agencies on this list, so they go down the line basically or rotate those services out. They're also responsible for maintaining all warrants. If there's any warrants that recall by the judge, that's essentially amending the warrant, our staff is in charge of updating that information and filing that information. There's a state law that also requires that our sheriff's office maintain a sex offender registry, and our dispatchers are responsible for that task currently as well. So as you can see over the years, our dispatchers have taken on more responsibilities, and it's really taken them away from their core responsibility, which is just dispatching for law enforcement. Our resources, we have a total of 13 full-time employees, 1 dispatch supervisor, and 12 dispatchers. We do have 3 shifts. Because we only have 1 dispatch supervisor, Shirley usually covers an 8 to 5 shifts, which means that we have 2 shifts that are unsupervised. Needless to say, we are deficient in in providing supervision with our dispatch. Our budget total is $665,000 between the town and the county. We share about 80% of that responsibility. Cuesta and Taos Ski Valley have paid $11,000 probably since 1992. They have not seen an increase in their fee. As well as Taos Pueblo pays about $5,400, and that's for services they receive with. We essentially run their NCIC for them. Now again, with the $11,000, Cuesta and Ski Valley assume that, again, the town is the service provider, so if there's any issues with their towers, their antennas, they put in a call to Shirley and expect for us to hire a consultant and attend to their issue immediately, negating the fact that they should probably be sharing in that responsibility as well. We have 7 repeater stations, 6 911 lines, and 3 non-emergency lines. Again, the NCIC, mapping, and 4 functional radios.
If I may, I think it's important to point out here, with 6 911 lines, it doesn't take that much for dispatch to be inundated. In other words, for that 7th call to be routed to Red River. So if 7 people call, that 7th call goes to Red River. And in essence, the backup we get from Red River is that they will take a message, and then they will call us back on the same line, when they think the traffic is down. So, for example, some of you may recall a few months back, I guess it was back in October, there was a controlled burn by Carson. Well, I saw it too, and a lot of people driving home saw it as well. And people just called. What's going on there? They called 911. Just that incident right there caused all 6 lines to be filled up. So that 7th line, had somebody had a heart attack, had there'd been a terrible accident or something like that, that call would have gone to Red River. Anyway, I just want to point out to you how limited we are in that.
They would have taken a message, and when we would have received that.
They would have called back minutes later. I guess there's no set procedure. There's no set procedure for what happens. They'll just keep trying later on. That's what they'll do.
Until the line is no longer busy, they can get through.
Will that situation predicament that we're in right now, is that going to be addressed in Mr. Lake's?
No. What Mr. Lake is going to be focused on more is just the space decision.
So is any move or any renovation, are we going to address that issue?
A renovation, this is a problem that won't be taken care of by a renovation. This is a problem that will only be addressed by a change in the institutional setting. For example, more dispatchers, more that can handle more lines, and the supervisory help that's behind that. But Mayor, if this is concerning, there's more to come here. I think that as you see that there's other things that we have here that are even more serious than this.
Well, I think it's very concerning. I don't want to take too much time on this part, but I think it's very concerning that if we only have 6 lines, and just for instance, the natural gas outage that people were looking at, when is it going to be restored, and these semi-emergency situations are clogging up the lines, and if there's a major emergency situation that now that person's put on a waiting list by virtue of being handled by an answer machine, is there a plan in place if we move to the command center? Is there going to be the availability of more lines?
Well, we can have more lines. We can have more stations, and hopefully, if we move there, the way we operate will be different enough such that our dispatchers aren't being distracted by, as you saw, a lot of non-911 calls. To give you a really quick idea, last year there were 83,000 calls. 83,000 calls. Not 20,000 of those were 911 calls. So, 3 times more calls of non-emergency type than the other ones. And on top of that, they're doing warrants, they're doing all these many other things, buzzing in the police officers, and eating at their desks. And I guess what I'm saying, Mr. Mayor, is that if we were to add another couple of lines, I don't know that would get you necessarily a better focused dispatcher, because they're pretty distracted already as it is.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, real quick, Oscar, with regards to our emergency dispatch and just dispatch services as a whole, I know they dispatch for public utilities also.
Yes, sir.
Is that something that we can maybe look to remove from dispatch and bring internally into the town? I mean, even via cell phone? I mean, I don't know. It seems like there's an inundation there for services.
Well, you're noting something it's a big anomaly. Normally, you don't dispatch your broken water pipes through your 911, but what you see here is an operation that over the years has been taking on more and more and more and more and more. And now that you're there, why don't you go ahead and also make copies? And sadly, and I mean this partly as an apology to the employees there, is that sadly over time, a very critical function, people that you call on to make very weighty decisions and put themselves in front of bad circumstances every day and then go back and sleep on that. Those people over time, I think because of the institutional setting, we have sort of treated them as operators, as just sort of message takers, et cetera, where in fact they're very important. They're very important pieces of the public safety function, and that's what's happened, Councilman. They over time, well, while you're there answering 911, well, why don't you go ahead and get the broken pipe call? And by the way, people call in and they'll say, "Can you switch me to," et cetera. I don't know myself. I have been switched from Central Dispatch for people who call the town manager after hours and expect the dispatch to switch me to my home phone, etc. So the whole setting, sir, is the whole setting needs to change. I guess is one of the things I want to tell you. And I guess I was telling Abigail earlier that if what comes out of here is a conversation solely about space, then somehow will have missed our mark. I'm sorry to
No, you're fine.
interrupt.
I was going to use that example too. Thank you. Moving on to our level of service, as Oscar mentioned, in 2012 we had 83,000 phone calls. Again, it's important to note that we only provide an overextended police dispatch center. It's a very basic service and not what we see on television. We do not have our staff certified in medical emergency dispatch. It's something that we've been striving to do. However, our fear is to have only some of the personnel certified and not others. So at this point, for liability reasons, we've opted to not provide medical emergency dispatch. Some of our dispatchers are non-certified.
I'm sorry, Abigail. I guess as someone who has loved ones in this community, this was one of the facts that most shocked me. So if you get that call that some loved one needs medical assistance, you are not going to get that, and we have not done that in some time. Provide that medical assistance through dispatch. In other words, that made in Hollywood scenario. My child is not breathing. What do I do? We are not set up, and we do not provide that backup to you. So I do think it's important, Mr. Mayor, to just make it very clear to you that that's the level of service that we provide here, given the circumstances that we have to provide them. I'm sorry, Abigail. Keep
It's
going.
fine. As I mentioned earlier, there's non-certified dispatchers. Some of the state does allow for dispatchers to work without certification for up to a year, and then after that, they're required to get certified. But by the time that year comes up, usually have that employee resign. So we have a high turnover within the last year and a half, 2 years. We've had probably about a 50% turnover rate. As mentioned previously, we also do the non-emergency duties that I discussed earlier, as well as buzzing in the officers or filing a warrant, so they're not solely focused on 911 calls. There is currently no capability for quality control. We do not analyze our data, so there's nothing that we can use that measures how well we're doing or how not so well we're doing in different areas. And important to note as well is that we have a 1 to 12 span of supervisory control versus the 1 to 5, which is a standard.
In other words, Shirley supervises 12 people over 3 shifts. Also handles antenna questions. And by the way, there's no antenna expert on staff. But whatever comes through, we have been for years now. I'm fairly expecting somehow that Shirley is going to pick all of that up. And that's part of what we want to reveal to you here, that we can't do that. Certainly we can't do that well.
Our strengths, we do consider that our employees, the knowledge of the region constitutes a strength in our dispatch, and we also recently revised the policy and procedure manual. We do have several weaknesses, to include our employee morale. They are in some unfortunate working conditions, and they're also not paid as well as they should be paid for what we ask them to do. Our equipment is by no means state of the art. There are some upgrades that need to be done, and we lack the resources or the funding to do that as well. Our safety coordinator, Amy Seidel, recently performed an assessment of the dispatch center and found that it is poorly ventilated. A lot of our dispatchers' complaints is that when they enter the building, they begin sneezing or coughing, and once they leave, they stop sneezing or coughing. And Amy did note that a lot of the ducts or the vents have not been cleaned ever since the employees can remember, and they asked that a question of Shirley as well as some of our most veteran staff. and we do have unsteady funding sources. We have been meeting with our stakeholders, and we discussed the possibility of increasing the amount of monies that we put into this critical service, and of course they have concern with that, and also, although the county does pay for and the town pay for 80% of the operations, to date we have not received a payment from the county. Some of our threats are the disintegrated partnerships that we talked about in the past. The stakeholders would meet probably about once a year. Obviously not beneficial to what attention the dispatch center requires. In the last 6 months, we've probably met about 4 or 5 times, and all of the partners have agreed to meet on once a month, and we have maintained that schedule thus far. Again, our rate of turnover on our personnel, we're about at 50%. It's one of our biggest threats is that we or the community continue to think or expect a certain service to be provided by our dispatchers, and we do not have the means or the setting right now to live up to those standards. And because the town is seen as the service provider, I think we're in the greatest danger for some liability. Our work plan, as Oscar mentioned previously, is to really get out of this presentation is that there is a need, a must for a shift to a new institutional setting. A town of 6,000 people can no longer bear the responsibility of providing this critical service for 30,000 people. We recently received a $75,000 grant. We will complete the refurbishment of the repeater sites. We must improve the space and the staffing needs of our dispatchers. We have already begun the process of meeting with our stakeholders and discussing the JPA that's before you today. And they're pretty much in agreement that something like this needs to be in place in order for us to move forward. And we need to continue updating our policies and procedures and eventually get all of our staff to be trained to dispatch an emergency medical dispatch, as well as be certified by Department of Public Safety, DPS. And we do need to institute a data quality control program. Data is important so that it helps us make sound decisions or good decisions on things that we must change or continue to do depending on what our data tells us. That concludes the presentation, and I stand for any questions.
Any questions, concerns? This time I think we were getting the questions answered as we were going along. So. Thank you, Abigail. Thank you. Okay, next item, we'll go to the report by Little Lake of 911 Solutions, LLC. Mr. Lake will, with 911 Solutions, will provide a report regarding the command center. We've received, council members have received the report, and it is here, and he will go over the report with us. Mr. Lake, welcome to our meeting.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, council members, and Oscar, good to see you. Thank you for having me. Let me throw some gasoline on one of the previous comments, if I could, in clarification of the 6 911 lines. 3 of those lines are for landline calls coming in. That's, in other words, your home phone calls coming in to you. The other 3 are for cell phone calls. So once you get that 4th cell phone call, then that call goes to Red River. So it's not the 7th per se. It really is the 4th phone call on cell phones. And approximately 70% of your 911 calls are cell phone calls nowadays. So
can you explain that? If there's 6 landlines?
There's 6 911 lines. 3 of those lines are for landlines. That's your home phone attached to the wall in your home. Those calls come in on 3 specified lines. And if it's a cell phone, it comes in on 3 other specified lines. So you really, if you have, anytime you have more than 3 people calling in on the same type of telephone, you're going to get an overflow, which then goes to Red River.
And what is that? Because of the tracking that they use for cell phones?
Yes. Okay. It's the way it's the way CenturyLink sends those calls into the center. you actually should have at least 2 more cell phone lines coming in, 911 lines coming in. So you really should have 5 and 3 calls there.
Councilmember Fidel?
Is there any way to, I'm sorry, excuse me, is there any way to take and have those cell phone calls coming in transferred to a landline that we have? So they could be answered through that landline?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Peralta, I don't think so. That is a setup with, I almost said Quest, CenturyLink, and the hard wiring that has to happen at the equipment, the 911 equipment in the system. Because you're also getting, anti-alley, what we call anti-alley, automatic number location and automatic address location coming in. They have to come in and bring that information on that specific phone line that comes in. So it's not as simple as we would like to make it. It has to be separated. There.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Okay.
You all received a copy of the official final report. I apologize, I sustained an eye injury this past weekend, so if I blink and look up and look down, bear with me on that. The site assessment was of the 2 basic sites, the Civic Plaza Drive and the Gustav Road site. The methodology used was a facility assessment criteria and audit standards that was developed by the National Emergency Number Association, another acronym, NENA, as we know it. NENA, the National Trade Organization, you might say, for technology and for operations of 911 centers. It's through this standardization that allows us to transfer a 911 call from here to Albuquerque, from Albuquerque to Las Cruces, that same call from Las Cruces to El Paso, Texas, and across the nation if we needed to. So by having standardized equipment, we're able to, all of the 911 centers are able to talk to each other out there. So they're the ones that somewhat set the standards that we pretty much follow. The criteria that I examined was about 17 items, I think it is. The communications room, looking at the square footage, the condition, the flooring, the walls, the soundproofing, the windows. The equipment room, that's the back room where we keep the servers, the telephone switches, the uninterrupted power sources, those types of things that can sit in a back room and work, and they put out a lot of heat. Looking at the square footage, the condition, the walls, the wiring, I looked at expansion capability to go up to at least 2 more consoles, 2 more positions that you probably are very close to needing, and could that facility take on those additional pieces of furniture? The radio system, external equipment, internal equipment, the towers, the antennas, the 911 telephone system, the administrative, the non-emergency telephone system, the console, the furniture, the condition of those items, the upgrade possibility where they can be refurbished, the lighting of the room, the lighting on the furniture, the consoles themselves, the recording systems, HVAC in the dispatch room, the equipment room. Those 2 rooms must be, or I shouldn't say must be, but the dispatch room is kept at a different temperature than the equipment room. The equipment room must be much colder due to all of the equipment that's in there in a closed environment. We looked at uninterrupted power sources, the generator, and the adequacy of those, the duration, how long will they last during an emergency, maintainability of the equipment, parking for employee safety, the lighting of the parking areas, internal facilities, that's the break room, restroom, offices, site security, homeland security, looking at that. Can you really withstand a bomb threat or an actual bomb going off? And PA standards of communications, IT, and the adequacy of that. So taking all of those into consideration, we created a scoring matrix of each facility to try to break this down into numbers. we did a scoring of 0 to 5. 0 means that the item lacks any characteristics of a 911 center that there is. A 1 means it meets the characteristics less than adequate. In other words, it's below standard, but it's there. And all the way up to 5 where it's considered as outstanding. We then took each one of those items that I just went through and gave it a weighting factor. Is it desired, something it's a nice to have, is it important, or is it critical for the operation? In taking the Civic Plaza Drive facility, on the left is all the criteria. The weighting factor is it critical? Is it nice to have? Times the raw score. Did it meet standard? Did it not meet standards? Was it above adequacy, less than adequate? And multiplied those out. I don't want to sit here and go through all that. You have that in your packet, but you're coming up with a score of like 72, which I'll give you where that fits in the total picture here in a few minutes. This is a photograph of the comm center, and I show you this photo because one of the major problems that you're faced with here is the furniture is back to back in this facility, and you will see where the white on the right side. You'll see where the white post comes down. That's really coming down in the back of the furniture where everything is held. On the back of that furniture is a panel that houses the equipment that needs to be cleaned. The electrical equipment, the computers, and it's almost impossible to clean that because of the way the furniture is positioned. So you have failures. There's no way to, I shouldn't say no way, it is very difficult to clean that furniture. That means the dispatchers have to shut down. If there's another position open, go to that position and dispatch while an employee crawls underneath and tries to clean without disconnecting all of the cords. This is a small, and I don't know what to call this room, but it is not separate from the dispatch room itself. It actually is part of the dispatch room. But it houses the coffee pot, the toaster, a file cabinet, notebooks, tons of cords, a dead UPS that the employees are looking at and dealing with every day. This is one of the...
Is that the default break room then? Or?
I'm sorry?
Is that the default small break room? Because there's no break room.
That is not a break. That's only about 3 feet wide.
Okay.
This is a photograph of the vent in the dispatcher's dispatching room. With the roof leaking, it's very possible that that's mold that we see coming out of that. It's hard to tell at this point. I didn't stick my finger up there and taste it just to make sure, but it's what it looks like. This is the records room where your boxes of files are with an exit outside. They're all in there. The advantages of that facility, there are none. I'll be straightforward with you, there are none. It requires, and I estimated about $837,000 to renovate that facility. That needs asbestos remediation, which requires then the employees leave that building, move to another facility, which requires a moving cost. Once that's complete, you would then bring those employees back and the equipment back, and that would be another moving cost. And so that's when this really becomes almost prohibitive. The building is inadequate with crowding. There is no break room. Employees who are eating at their consoles with their food and their drink, all they have to do is tip over that soft drink, and you have then hit all the computers underneath, keyboards, and shorted out a complete console. Food crumbs are going to get in the keyboards and the other equipment. It happens. and I can speak from experience, it happened at my facility, and we just literally had to ban it because it was so bad. But the employees have no other place to go to really have a place to rest and take a break from their demanding jobs. We went over Abigail over their other duties that they're doing. As I said, it does not allow for the effective cleaning and maintenance of the equipment, which causes failures. The employees are getting ill in the room with through the ducts, the dirt, the asbestos. Investment into the building to accommodate an upgrade or additional equipment, I think, would be lost if you try to put as Oscar said one time, a $10 saddle on a $2 horse. It's just you're not going to get it there. There will be a need to increase the number of dispatchers and console furnitures in there, and there is absolutely no space to do that. It just cannot be done. As I mentioned, the entire building will need asbestos remediation. Does not meet NFPA standards for communications. Doesn't meet it in the building codes, and the working environment is not conducive to retaining employees. So when you hire employees, and they come in and they work for a while, they say, do I really want to work here? The answer probably is no, I would rather have a nice place to work. The Gustav Road scoring matrix, the same criteria, the same weighting factor as the other, as Civic Plaza, but the raw score changes on the capability, giving you a criteria total of 167 points. Versus the 72 or 70 from the other facility. Probably not the best photograph, but this is the large room, about 2,250 square feet, including the 2 offices that are in front. The equipment room, which is larger than your present equipment room, but quite sufficient for handling the equipment that you would need. The advantages of that facility is it eliminates the perception that the town is entirely responsible for 911. It allows for expansion, which you must expand. It's there. You are woefully inadequate is the best way to put it. The partners that you have, if you can create even more, will have ownership of the operation. Any investment or time in the funds will be a positive. It allows for the incorporation of the Emergency Operations Center, which would be ideal there simply because of its location, its backup power source, its radio capability, coordination. It's all right in one building. It provides security for the 911 operators. That is one of the areas that I would really be concerned about at the Civic Plaza facility, is there is no security for those operators going in and out of the building. And there is no security whatsoever for the building. Excuse me. I think you've all heard that there are 3 bullet holes in the window of the dispatch center. There was a gentleman who also pulled up in his vehicle right next to the window several years ago with a live pipe bomb. The backup power source is more than adequate to maintain that facility. As a whole, I think the operation, based on my estimates, at 25% power would last 2.5 days roughly, whereas Civic Plaza, the police department, you're looking at about 15 hours before you would have to have someone come in with propane and refill the tank to keep you going.
Concerning that propane tank, what is the location of that to the building?
It's right next to the building.
So if somebody was to put a bullet into it, you'd wipe out that building?
You would, yes. It would probably levy or, yes, explode.
Thank you.
This facility has what I would consider a designated training area where it would allow you to train 5 dispatchers, 6 dispatchers at a time in a class. And you could actually pull, if it's slow, dispatchers off the floor and have them training while they're on duty so you wouldn't have to pay overtime. meets ADA accessibility standards. So now we rate the two buildings. Where do they fit? The score of 72 on the police department building, characteristics less than adequate. And that's where I would absolutely put your facility. You have a 911 center, but it is very less than adequate. The Gustav Road facility with a score of 167 is considered very well, characteristics of a 911 emergency communications center. If we put that on a graph, 220 points was the maximum you could get, so you see what outstanding is on the left, and to get that I'm not sure what you would have to do except spend millions of dollars to get to there. But it will give you some relationship in the two facilities where they are to super duper stardom for a 911 center. I was asked if I would evaluate another 911 center, that being the Bernalillo County Center, and I'm very familiar with that center. I was the director there for almost 10 years. And we pretty much set the standard for the state for 911 centers. That center scored less than the Gustav Road Center scored. Not much less, but it did score less. And its big issue was security, horrible security at that facility for the employees. And part of the security issue is if someone pulls up next to the building and blows a hole in the side of the building, it doesn't mean that the employees are taken care of and they come back that afternoon and go back to work. More than likely, the equipment is gone. You're out of business for 6 months before you're back up. So that's why security is key to maintaining viability of your center. The equipment that once you approve the grant from DFA, right now you're scheduled for June or July. If you were to approve that today, let's say, just to give you an example, before that would be installed. So you're a ways out on that one. And the equipment is replaced roughly every 7 years. So the decision you make, you need to take that in consideration. If you plan on staying at the present site for 7 years, you're okay. Because DFA will not pay for a move, to move equipment. That's one of the issues that we run into. It just will not happen. They will pay for the initial installation, but if you want to move it, you're paying it on your own. It's the same way with the telephone lines that are coming in. Your telephone lines, they'll pay for the initial phone lines, but if you move them, you have to pay for the move. They'll continue to pay for the phone line charges thereafter. So moving becomes a big cost, and we're looking at slightly over $300,000 just to move equipment. I want to make sure, and I think Abigail touched on this, that nothing in this report is denigrating to the dispatchers. They're hardworking folks, so do not take anything away from them. They're having to work with what they're given, and they're doing the best they can. So I want to make sure that it's clear that nothing here is negative about the dispatchers and your employees. And I do want to thank Oscar and Abigail and Chief Koch and Ruben for their help in this whole project. We literally have worked weekends, Oscar particularly, and Abigail particularly, well, and Ruben particularly, constant, never quit the entire 6 or 7 weeks we were on this. So a thank you to all of them and their input to this. The other side of that, I have been paying my sales tax in motel rooms and restaurants, so I'm hoping to get you out of that little budget shortfall a little at a time out there. I'll stand for any questions.
Okay. Any questions, comments this time? Councilor Gonzalez?
Just one question, Mr. Lake. With regards to the switchover lines, the 3 LAN, 3 cell phone lines, where does that fall into the picture with regards to some of the advertising that's been happening with like the life alerts and my mom just got an advertisement for Verizon providing that same, almost that click to emergency service. Does that relay directly to dispatch, and is that using up part of that line? And
Mayor and Councilman Gonzalez, you're talking about I refer to it as a life alert, a pendant around the neck.
Yeah.
Normally what happens is that phone line, once that button is pushed, it seizes your phone line and sends that signal to an alarm company. That alarm company then has information on file on your mother, for example, as to who the respondent is for fire, medical, law enforcement. Next of kin, relative, neighbor, those types of things. They then make that phone call in, and they're making a phone call usually not on 911 because they're located in Minneapolis, for example. So they're calling a 10-digit number to reach the communication center here.
So either way, it's routed to communications.
Right, that's correct. Right. Most communication centers do not receive alarms directly from the bank. For example, that alarm does not come normally directly into communication. It goes to an alarm company, and then they relay it in from there.
Okay. Councilmember Peralta?
Mr. Mayor, based upon the 8,400 or 8,300 calls that 1,000. I'm sorry. I was trying to get the right number, but I was leaving a zero off. Based on that number of calls coming in, and I realize that, 70% of those calls are non-911 calls, but yet they're handled by the same number of personnel. Based upon that, how does that relate to another county our size, from your information, if you have it? And secondly, what should be the staffing that we should have to handle that number of calls? Not necessarily 911 dispatchers, but personnel just to handle that volume of calls and to keep our emergency services operating in a much more efficient and needs provided.
On page 4 of the report I submitted, I took Taos County into consideration with the next 3 I shouldn't say neighboring, closest population counties with you, and how many dispatchers are on duty for those. Los Alamos, with only 17,000 or 18,000 residents, has 14 dispatchers. Cibola County, 27,000 population, 13. Taos at 32,000 with technically 12, but most of the time it's 11 dispatchers. And Rio Arriba with 40,000 population with 17 dispatchers. I was not able to take into effect or add to that number one that I could verify, and that is the number of visitors to Taos on a daily basis. In checking with the Convention Visitors Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce, they would not commit to X number of visitors per day come into town. So if you're looking at 8,000 visitors a day, even at the low end, I would say, you're up into what Rio Arriba has of 17. So you're looking at needing an additional 5 or 6 dispatchers.
So that's about 2 per shift.
That's about, actually, it takes 5.2 dispatchers to cover, to equal 1 24 hours, 7 days a week, because they're working 40-hour weeks. So it takes, so you're looking at adding 1 more person on staff, but that would take 5.2 employees to do that with. To account for days off, to account for certain days for training, holidays, and to cover 24/7.
Were you, Mr. Mayor, were you able to ascertain the call volume for these other counties? as compared to ours?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Peralta, no, I did not go into looking at that. I don't have that data. DFA probably has that data. It's a requirement of each 911 center every year to provide that data, but it's my understanding that they don't do it. So I could make some phone calls to see if that would work, if they would give me the data, if they collect the data. I'm guessing one of those counties is not going to have that data. But it's something we could look into.
It just seems to me that the call volume we're getting is enormous, and a lot of that could be the number of visitors we have to our community. But because of that, it has a relationship to what we have to have as far as the number of people operating the lines,
right? And
how many lines we have to service that volume. So that was the reason I was asking the question about the relationship between counties which are basically about our same size and the volume they're having, and the relationship to that and the number of employees that they have on staff.
Right. I did not get into that arena, so I really
that note,
I don't have that answer.
On Councilor Peralta's note there, Oscar mentioned that of the 80,000 plus calls that we get, about 20,000 were actual 911 related. On these other facilities, are they in the business of dispatching everything else that we're doing, or are they primarily focused on just 911 calls? What's the norm, and do they handle warrants? Do they handle after-hours calls?
Mayor, I would only guess at this point. I really don't have that answer without talking to the respective directors there to see if they are.
Because I think that's part of this whole institutional change.
Yeah.
That has to be evaluated.
In Sandoval County, Mr. Lake, in Sandoval County, when you were director,
I was director in Bernalillo County.
Excuse me, in Bernalillo County. What was the practice there?
To fight and argue to not take anybody else's calls that you didn't have to take, because those calls are time consuming. And once you're on a call with someone that has nothing to do with your line of work, for example, animal control, we did not take animal control. They're time consuming, and there are lots of calls. And it was an issue that you want to force those calls because, I think as you mentioned earlier, it's easy to simply say, why don't you take them? You're already there. And it's like, we're not doing anything else, and it becomes overwhelming.
What many cities do, certainly the large cities that can afford this, but what many cities do to try and take that volume of 911 calls off, they invest in a 311 service so that people know easily to call the administrative side on the 311, and those calls go to a totally different center. At least
that's correct.
The major cities that I'm aware of, I don't know of a single major city where the 311 calls go into your 911 center.
They're kept totally separate. Albuquerque does have a 311, and I'm not sure that's even up after hours now. It used to be, but I'm not sure it's even there now after hours. But the 311, you're going to get phone calls for, are tickets available for this show, and it goes on and on and on. It's time consuming for them too.
Sure. Any other questions, comments before Councilmember Vega?
Thank you, Mayor Cordova, council members, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Lake, thank you very much for an excellent report. I'm looking at page 4 of 43 now, and we already touched on this a little bit, talking about staffing levels. If you take Los Alamos, Cibola, and Rio Arriba dispatch centers, and you average it, each of those centers is providing, has one dispatcher for every 1,914 citizens. If you apply that same standard, that average standard, to Taos, we should have 17 dispatchers, and we have 12. To get to 17, we'd have to have an approximate 50% increase in staffing levels to get us there. So number one, we're severely understaffed. Mm-hmm. Number two, looking at your report, the facilities and equipment that we provide our dispatchers to operate in are pathetic. That place ought to be blowing up tomorrow. It's a pathetic facility. You need a new facility. I know we have current employees, and I know we have retired employees that argue that it's adequate. I respect their positions. However, as policymakers, as leaders, we're empowered to make the right decisions to ensure that our dispatchers have the adequate training, equipment, money, facilities to provide the best possible service. And it's really sad because this building was designed as a post office in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Then it transitioned to a bank. And then in 1992, it transitioned to dispatch/police department. And really, the building ought to be burned down. It ought to go away. And anyone that argues that it's an adequate facility, I have to question your judgment and your common sense in providing the best possible facility to provide the most critical thing that this community does, which is emergent. Mr. Northrup, please,
Mr. Northrup,
I'm talking.
you're out of order. We are going to allow public hearing. No.
Your words are not to you. They're to anybody. Please sit down, Mr. Northrup. I have the floor. So anyway, as we move on in this report, Mr. Lake, I'd like to look at this in a little bit different manner. If I move us over to page 34, you used weighted criteria, you used scores for the weighted criteria, and you gave a score to both the current location and the proposed location. In the current location, you came up with 70 points out of a maximum of 220 points, and then you squeezed that into the range being has characteristics less than adequate, and then you also put it in a pictorial, which is very good. A picture paints 1,000 words versus what should be outstanding. If you convert that number to a percentage, that's a rating of 32%, folks. 32%. You want your dispatchers, your emergency dispatchers, to be operating in a facility that has a rating of 32%. Totally pathetic. If you go to the proposed location on Gusdorf Road, that facility scored 167 points out of 220 points. If you convert that to a percentage, that is a percentage of 76%. Some people might say our 76% is still mediocre, but it's a pretty solid number. As you stated earlier, Mr. Lake, the dispatch center for Bernalillo County scored just a tab under this score, and it's a top-notch dispatch center. So it's very clear, folks, that if you look at the data, you look at the facts, you look at the specifics, we have a dispatch center that needs to make a paradigm shift from the current institution to a regional institution. We need to provide them with the facilities that are needed to do an adequate job. And of course, internally, we have to work on staffing levels, and we have to work on improving a very poor morale with high turnover. Thank you, Mr. Lake.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Beta, if I might add, when you train an employee, in Bernalillo County, it was for 4 months before we turned them loose. We had over, I think it was $16,000 invested in that employee. They had not provided 1 hour of service to the community or to the county at that time. So if we lost that employee in that 4-month period, that was money down the drain. That was money we totally wiped off, never to recoup. And when this happens, when you have a 50% turnover rate, which is national average is probably around 20%. National average, there's some 911 centers in New Mexico that are sitting at 5%. That's money that you've lost because now you're having to train that employee again that's there. And if I might draw your attention to page 2, not a lot of writing, but it does say that the 911 Emergency Communications Center is the backbone of public safety. When you lose that, you've lost public safety. Law enforcement, fire, and EMS, it's gone. There's no one calling the shots at that point. And if you would look at the photograph there, that is the supervisor's console at Bernalillo County. And there's going to be one more monitor added to that setup. And there are 9 monitors there. It's going to be 10. As soon as next generation, next gen, as we call it, 911 comes into play into the state. And next gen allows you to text 911 and send a message rather than making a phone call. And that's coming, which means you're going to have more monitors, more technology coming into the center. So this is going to get larger than you ever thought it was going to get there.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Councilor Silva?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a comment and then I have a question. The comment is that our citizens definitely deserve better, and we're not giving them that right now. The question that I have, Mr. Lake, is in your assessment and comparison study, did you look at any other town-owned or maybe even county-owned facilities that could be used? And if so, how did they stack up to the needs that you would require for such a building that we're talking about today?
Mr. Mayor, Council Member Silva, my duty was to evaluate the 2 facilities. I did take a look at the convention center, and I did take a look at the Mary Medina building from the outside. I was told not to go inside. It's not safe. The convention center is about almost 2,000 square feet larger, and I'm only talking one of the rooms than you would actually need. But in order to make that into a 911 center, you would have to build rooms, change the ductwork, because remember I said the ducting for the equipment room is temperature and everything is different than the normal dispatch room, that's different than the break room, the restroom, for example. And I did address these on page 42, 43 in the book here. The bigger issue is that facility is bordered, that one room is bordered on 2 public streets, which presents a public safety issue. You also would have to buy a large generator to keep that facility up and going, and a lot of electrical work to bring in the power to and outlets to accommodate all the equipment that's there. The Mary Medina building really is in maybe not a technical floodplain, but it is prone to flooding, which to me automatically eliminates that and any possibility of being an emergency communications center, because you cannot constantly be leaving the building, coming back in, leaving the building, coming back in, and damage from there. So to me, that was not a real option to go into that building.
You didn't score them on the matrix that you used for these other 2 sites?
No, I did not.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Peralta?
Mr. Mayor, I guess, I'm kind of in the same position. We've got a facility now that just can't meet our needs, and we have to move. But one of the things that I looked at, if you were to take, let's say, for example, the convention center and make it acceptable for a 911 center, you would be spending pretty much the same sort of money you would be to renovate the current facility, because of all the conversions that would have to go into it, plus the security issues that you would have
Mr.
to
Mayor,
find a way
Councilor
around.
Peralta, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Mayor, just to add one bit of information, at the last minute, Ruben pointed out to us that there was also another facility that might be worthwhile looking at, and Mr. Lake did not get a chance to see that facility just because we thought about that at the last minute, and that is the Armory north of town, that's in front of the Pueblo. Mr. Lake, just most you got a chance to see there was just pictures of it, et cetera. So But that was one of the places we also considered. It's a facility that's owned by the county. There's a tower there right now, and we understand that there's issues with that tower, et cetera. But anyway, that was just one other one that he looked at the very last minute, very quickly.
I did look at that, Mr. Mayor and Oscar. I did look at that very quickly. It is 12,000 some square feet, and more than 7,000 square feet that you need. Can you partition that off? There's a possibility you could partition that off. It was a county facility, and I did not have access to that at the last minute to look at that building. But as Oscar mentioned, there's just already a protest from the tower that's there. So
that tower's coming down.
And if that's the case, then you're not going to put a tower up there for that. So.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, questions? If not, I'll open up to some public comment. Anyone like to speak under the public section? I did promise constituents that I would allow public comment when this was on the agenda.
Quick comments.
Okay.
I haven't had an opportunity to review what he was presenting. Obviously, he had a book that I didn't have and so forth. But for instance, his last statement, well, he looked at the Armory, and the Armory has 12,000 feet, and that's 7,000 feet more than we need. So in other words, is he saying we need 5,000 feet for a facility we now have in 400 square feet? It just doesn't make any sense. He hasn't addressed the cost. He says the cost to move is $300,000. We heard numbers more like $800,000 to $1 million before. Where did his $300,000 come from? He said it would cost $850,000 to temporarily move out of the place we are now to rehabilitate refurbish the old bank, and then move back would be $850,000. These are all numbers that need to be looked at and questioned. Who's looked over his shoulder, who has experience in this kind of operation? It just seems to me like it's a railroad job, unless the town is looking to investigate what it is he has said. This is one man making one report. And I think we have to look much more, and it seems to me like it was cooked to begin with. As you know, that's my opinion, and there's lots of other people that feel the same way. And I think there has to be a great deal of investigation into what it is that he has presented to us. And all of a sudden it was...
Mr. Northrop, just for the record, can you give us your background on communication?
I have zero,
okay.
But I have a lot of background on watching government waste. Spent a whole lifetime watching that, and in phony studies and phony reports. And I'm not saying Mr. Lake's report is phony. I'm not saying that at all. But I do question the numbers, and I think you people should be looking at it much more closely as well. I mean, just Mr. Peralta's question about the convention center and what could be done there, and Mr. Lake blew it off very quickly. Well, it's on 2 streets and blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay, that's right. So I guess that's not suitable. I mean, that's a big building, and probably, part of the building's right near the street, and a good part of it isn't near the street. I mean, I don't know anything about this kind of stuff on the most technical grounds, but it just seems to me that these numbers were cooked from the beginning. Well, we've got a vent here that maybe it has mold on it, maybe it doesn't. Well, clean the vent and see what the problem is. If the roof is leaking, how much was it going to cost to fix the roof? It's everything seemed to be predetermined. The fact that he really didn't take a close look at these other buildings.
Mr. Northrop, I'm going to stop you there. Do you have any legitimate, other than false accusations, do you have any legitimate...
I don't know if they're false or not. We need to look at it and see. I don't know that Mr. Lake's numbers are false or not, but just take one man's opinion.
Mr. Northrop, I'm just going to say that you do have a history of lying, just like you did a little while ago when you said DMC, the police wastes money at DMC for these things.
That was a mistake on my part, and I apologize.
Added to your numerous ones. So unless you have, I would encourage you to meet with the manager or myself, and we would be happy to show you this page by page. But you failed to do so because you will breed off of the negativity.
Will the town be willing to hire someone else to come in and review these numbers?
We went through that process. We went through and we're not going to go through that.
Okay. Well, there'd be no reason.
Do you have anything else to say?
I have something to say, and that is there would be no reason for me to meet with you and all of us looking at a bunch of numbers that we don't have any idea whether there's any basis in fact in them. Where did the 830,000, 40,000 come from to move from where we are now temporarily somewhere else? And are there any alternatives to moving somewhere else and then moving back? That sounds like a huge amount of money to move a facility to I don't know where, maybe to the convention center for a month it would take for the renovation. I mean, but $830,000 to move, a block away without moving a tower seems like an extraordinary amount of money. Anyway, I think the whole thing's cooked.
Well, you're absolutely false. Anything else? Anyone else want to comment on this?
I will, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Chairman Baroni.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you guys for being here and allowing me to just say a few words. I want to run out and hug Shirley and her staff because, after this presentation, it kind of made me aware of what's going on in there. I had no idea. I think I can say that, I think it's something that's overdue. I think we need to move forward in some sort of manner. I can't say, we haven't seen all the figures. We don't know exactly what you guys are going through. I know that we participate as a party to this, and I think it's imperative that, we sit down as neighbors, as governing bodies, and figure out what's going on and if we can help, if we have the availability. I know that we are kind of, I want to say, fighting over the same money. Right now the economy is where it's at. Everybody knows where it's at, and I hope that our economy comes up, then we wouldn't be, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, I don't think. So I think, as one of the commissioners, I think we need to sit down as a joint body and see if we can't come to some type of resolution, whether we're going to move to the command center, if there's another option. But I just, like I say, I don't want to discount Shirley and her staff, because with what she has over there, she's doing a heck of a job. So I just want to applaud her for, and you guys, and I hope that we can sit at the table with you guys, and hopefully we can come up to some kind of resolution.
Commissioner, and you as the chairman, I do want to thank you for your diplomatic approach on many issues. You've always been commissioner. Well, you represent us in the county, and we're the county's biggest district.
Yes.
I certainly appreciate your leadership at the county commission, and I look forward to working with you. I would encourage the manager, along with your manager, to set up a meeting so that we can begin these discussions. I think it's imperative, especially when you're dealing with 911, and when you see the deficiencies that we, as stakeholders, are seeing. It's imperative that we work swiftly on this.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make that comment because, if Shirley's working in that condition, I know,
sure.
We need to applaud her for all the work that done in there. And again, we haven't seen all the figures.
Sure.
So, but we'd love to sit at the table with you guys, and maybe we can come up to some kind of resolution. Because,
absolutely.
We're a 50% partner in this. Well, I want to say 40-40, I guess, is what the split would be.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
So
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Anyone else under the public comment section want to speak on this? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment section and go to any further questions from the council. Any comments, questions? I just want to, for the record, make it very clear that, and thank staff, thank Abigail, the chief. Chief, you came into this issue as it was in progress, and also echo my appreciation to Shirley for working with the environment that we've had to do. Oscar, for your leadership in ensuring that this keeps moving forward, realizing that this is 911. Like we're moving road projects and the sports facilities, all these projects, this has to be a priority. This is one of our most important responsibilities that we have as government. I encourage anyone and the minority individuals that are out there making these erroneous and, quite frankly, irresponsible allegations that these numbers are cooked. I encourage them to meet with their eyes open and look at reality. I met Mr. Lake for the first time. I think when you went to Oscar's office, I think that's when I formally met you. We went to an RFP. This is a credible process. Basically, Mr. Lake, what you have in this report, we've known a lot of it. That's why the command center was built, to the credit of Kit Carson Electric and the stakeholders that got all this on board, because they had a lot of this information of the inadequacies. Unfortunately, we had to, because it became political, and when you see, as Councilmember Abeyta mentioned it a little while ago, anyone with common sense would understand the need and understand all of the issues we're faced with. When you showed us all your criteria where you get the moving costs, when you came up with an estimate of to remodel of $671,000 on the report, you based it on $132 a square foot, based on, and you showed exactly where your research came from. When you showed exactly what is the asbestos remediation cost, what's an estimate? You showed exactly what your source was based on industry averages. That's to remodel the existing place. In remodeling the existing place, we're looking at two moves. One to move out and then to move back in. So when you see over $1 million in renovations to simply stay there, it's irresponsible. Not only is it irresponsible, it'd be quite foolish to think that the existing facility is our answer when it's clear that we need at least 5 more employees to adequately support this organization. But more importantly than all of this move is the institutionalization of making it back what it was intended to be, where the stakeholders all have a say, where the stakeholders decide how the operations are going to operate. That's the more important thing. And to the town's fault, our mission statement contradicts that. Our mission statement reads, employees of the Taos Central Communications are dedicated to maintain partnership with our community to resolve public safety issues and enhance the quality of life within our city. That's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is for the whole county. That's what the JPA says. So more importantly than the move, which is a no-brainer, it's creating the institution and modeling. This isn't new. Councilor Peralta and then Mayor knows the success of creating JPAs. Look at our landfill. It's basically the same model, where the town doesn't say what goes on there. The stakeholders do. We are just the fiscal agent, and we administer through HR the employees. But how that landfill is managed and the expenditures are based through the joint powers agreement that's in effect, and that's what we need to do, is focus on that. And like I mentioned, the moving is a no-brainer. This report goes into great detail of what we've known, and I appreciate your hard work. But when it comes to public health, safety, and when you see the shocking on an issue where you simply see a fire in the horizon, you know you're going to get much more than 3 cell phones. And you have another cell phone, because nowadays most people don't buy landlines anymore. They buy prepaid cell phones. And you have that 4th person that's having a heart attack. That is irresponsible for us to continue operating this way. So I know we're going to look at the joint powers agreement next. Oscar, I think you've touched on it quite a bit.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I think I've...
Mr. Lake, thank you for your very credible report. I thank you for that.
By the way, Mr. Lake
Mr. Northrup, if you one more outburst, and I will have you escorted out of here. I'm not going to tolerate this nonsense anymore.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Councilmember Peralta.
Mr. Mayor, I think, also for the general public to know that and understand that this is just the first stage in now that we need to sit down with the stakeholders and analyze the data that's before us, and as a group make a decision as to how we move forward into the future of this. So there's a lot of decisions that still have to be made. I think the information that we have before us is going to help us lead the way towards a decision on what we do with our emergency center and its responsibility to all the citizens of Taos County, as you've said. And not only that, but also the responsibility we have to those that respond to the needs, the emergency needs of our citizens. So we have to look at that, and that's the most important thing that we have to do. And Commissioner Baroni, thank you for your input and your willingness to sit down with us and working for the betterment of all of our citizens.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Oscar?
Yes, sir.
We'll
On
move
the
on to the next item, which is Joint Powers Agreement. And Oscar, this is the first time that I believe, as I understood it, Commissioner Blankenhorn, who was the attorney back for the county, kind of created the initial draft,
Yes.
and then it was modified by then Manager Caldwell, and then we've kind of looked at it, and within those confines, kind of added our input to it. So, just for the record, that's where this Joint Powers Agreement came from. It didn't come from something that we
Right.
created here. It's just we put our input in it based on what was originally created.
Yes, sir. It's been an ongoing dialogue. There are many things in it that are very new, as I mentioned to you, including the sharing of the naming of the director, as well as even we don't presume in this joint powers agreement that we are even going to be the fiscal agent. I think that is a decision that should be reaffirmed by the stakeholders if in fact they want the town to continue being the fiscal agent. We're not the only ones who can do this, and there's a couple of other things that are in there that are very important. But the general logic there is the town, we're only 45% of the partnership. We very much acknowledge that. The big decisions here are shared decisions, and we want to put them all on the table, so that truly we get back to a partnership. And that's all I have there, Mr. Mayor. As I mentioned earlier on, it wasn't our intention that you would approve it here. I mean, obviously, if you want to, then you should do that. But it is a big document, a very weighty document, and it's something that at this point hasn't gotten that feedback from the county, although they started it out, and so here it goes back to them. I certainly will be reaching out to the county manager to see what issues they have. I've asked our town attorney to share a draft of this, and all the drafts. Actually, there's been a couple of drafts now that have gone to the county attorney, and really to anybody else that wants to see this, so they can have it. And by the way, this document, the Joint Powers Agreement, the report. All of the information that we have on the Emergency Communication Center is online. Anybody can see that at their will. And so any even old reports that we have, if people in the public can see something there that's missing, they just need to bring it to our attention. We'll post that as well. So anyway, that's what we have with the Joint Powers Agreement, Mr. Mayor. And that is also, in my opinion, the most critical of all of the documents, of all of the actions that you have here. That Joint Powers Agreement, that's the foundation. If we can get to that, then everything else makes sense. If we cannot get to that, as I mentioned to you earlier, we really aren't helping ourselves. We're leaving people with a false sense of security, as well as holding a great big liability for providing a service that there's no chance, whose expectations there's no chance we can meet.
Okay, Oscar, thank you. And I would just reiterate what you said there, that the decision to move is going to be up to the stakeholders, to the members involved in the Joint Powers Agreement. That is the decision, and the decision to hire an executive director will be based on criteria, and ultimately the decision will be by those members of the Joint Powers Agreement. I think that's a model that we've received from San Juan, and I think the council, hindsight, I think maybe the best action to take on this, just so that the county or the stakeholders are assured that we're on the same page, is maybe do that we approve approved the concept of this JPA, but I'm sure they're going to have some maybe input, and then bring it for final approval. But I think maybe an action would be that, look, we approve the draft in its form and bring it back, allow you to negotiate any, and bring it back for final. This way, at least the stakeholders know that we're at least on board with this.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, what I would recommend is that we follow what San Juan County did, which is they brought the joint powers agreement in front of all of the bodies, all of the stakeholders. So there was one great big meeting in San Juan County where all the municipalities and the county, the Commissioners Court, met. And it was at that one meeting. I mean, obviously there had been a lot of work and people had a lot of input, but the final vote actually took place with all of the bodies there. So I would envision at some point a meeting with Cuesta and Ski Valley all at the same place.
I like that idea. And then once, by virtue of us approving as stakeholders, then the board exists, and then the board would approve the JPA.
The board would approve the move and everything
that's
that
redundant.
comes
Yeah.
from it.
Councilor Pedota.
Mr. Mayor, member of council, I would agree with Oscar that what we need to do now is basically, in concept, approve moving the JPA forward to a joint meeting of all of the stakeholders. I'm sorry. I'll start again. I had my mic off. I would agree with Oscar that I think that what we need to do is approve the JPA in concept to move it forward to all the stakeholders for a joint meeting to discuss and to amend, ratify, whatever it takes to get this thing moving forward, if so desired by the parties. But I think that's what we need to do, is say that we've got something that we want to present to the stakeholders and allow them to review, and then set up a meeting for us to consider any comments, changes that they have to it, and see if we can come up with a compromise or consolidated agreement to move forward with this project.
So a motion would be to approve the JPA moving forward to a subsequent meeting with the stakeholders?
Yes.
Is that inform of the motion?
Also moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carries, and that is to move the joint powers agreement to a subsequent meeting with the stakeholders.
Yes, sir.
Next, we will go to the grant agreement with Department of Finance and Administration, Local Division. Consideration and possible approval of amendment number 2 to grant agreement 10E07 from the Department of Finance, Local Government Division in the amount of $362,019.32 for enhanced 911 services and equipment. The total grant agreement is now over $1.2 million with a maturity date of June 30th, 2014. No town match is required. Oscar, is this a grant agreement then, since it's unknown if we are the fiscal agent at this time under the proposed new joint agreement, should we table this?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would request either you table, Mr. Mayor. I would request that you either table it, or that you approve it with the understanding that it will not be executed until there's a new joint powers agreement, a satisfactory new joint powers agreement.
I agree with this way. At least the DFA knows that we've approved it, and so I would entertain a motion to approve the the Department of Finance and Administration grant for $362,019.32 for enhanced 911, with the condition that a new joint agreement would be signed with the stakeholders.
So move.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Under matters from the mayor and council youth member, I have one item. I think, ladies and gentlemen, did you receive a letter from the village of Cuesta?
Yes.
Right. I was asked by the village administrator and the mayor to read this, and I'll read it as follows. They wanted it read into the record. And it's from the village of Cuesta, and it's from the village administrator, Jim Fambro. And it reads as follows. Mayor Cordova, I am writing this to you to express my most sincere gratitude to you and the town of Taos for your assistance to the village of Cuesta during the recent water crisis. On the afternoon of January 3rd, 2013, the main water line was broken accidentally, and it caused us to lose water service throughout our community. Knowing that we did not have the resources to handle this during the late time of day, limited staff, and 18 below zero and dropping temperatures, I called you for assistance. During the next couple of hours, Mr. French Espinosa and I conversed numerous times, and he quickly provided much-needed technical support and support of staff and equipment. Over the next 12 hours, a concentrated effort of our staff and members of your staff went to work to isolate and repair the line. At 4 a.m. the next morning, we began to recharge our water system. Although we were not able to completely restore service to the entire village for over a week, we were able to begin the process. Had it not been for the dedicated employees working with ours, none of this would have been possible. Both Wampi, and that's William Espinosa, and Richard were very professional, and their expertise was appreciated by our staff and the residents. The night our water problems occurred provided that through partnerships and good relationships, we are able to perform the impossible. Please accept this humble letter and understanding that we are truly grateful for the assistance you and your community gave us. I look forward to our continued relationship and hope we can be of some help in some way to you in the future. I apologize for not delivering this message to you in person, but I am at a regular council meeting in Cuesta. Thank you. Respectfully, Jim Fambro, Village Administrator. So, if you see, next time you see our Public Works Director, just let them know that we sincerely appreciate helping our neighbors in Cuesta.
You bet.
Okay. Now, at this time, I would entertain, if there's nothing else by the council under matters from the mayor and council, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. We will go into executive session. Thank you. And this is no action item, and it's under pending and threatened litigation pursuant to NMSA 1015-1H7.
You know, Mayor, that's...
Oh, yeah. Mayor.
That we're able to attain. That's what the difference is.
We are clearly the biggest biodiesel producer in America and North America. You know, we're 10% up the technology curve. We know we need a Generation 2 feedstock, but we know there's a Generation 3 out there. And our goal is to be on the leading edge of that.